Let's imagine together for a moment. Imagine that we are on a rickety train in the heart of Mexico, traveling north towards the United States border. But don't freak out because that wall still has not been built. In a cabin crowded with strangers, your parents and 4 siblings do what they can to remain cool as you travel through the desert heat. Along the way, the stops are few and water is scarce, and your safety is anything but guaranteed. People squirm in their seats as they attempt to find a comfortable position to sleep, as we all just bounce along the tracks. And all of this is a small price to pay for what lies ahead. Hope. Because your family's headed to America, that great nation of immigrants from all over the globe, where the opportunity to form a new life awaits. As you imagined with me, you'd be forgiven if images of 2018 filled your mind. But our story took place a century ago in 1918. What a crazy time it was. Across Europe, World War I was at its apex, heralding the end of the last 5 great modern empires of Russia, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, and China. In the United States, the Ford Model T continued to dominate the automotive industry, and the movement towards prohibition was gaining steam. Innovations, such as Einstein's general theory of relativity, the production of stainless steel, and even the pants zipper, were all mere months from one another. And in the midst of these tectonic shifts of history and culture, a 40-day-old baby girl, swaddled in village clothing, is held close in her mother's arms as they make the 2,400-kilometer journey from Michoacan, Mexico, to the United States. Her name was Esperanza, which translates, fittingly, to hope. And she was my grandmother. The Mexican Revolution turned the state of Michoacan into a literal battlefield. A steady barrage of attacks from insurgents and rebels would often force villagers into hiding in the hills. Well, the fortunate ones would have their homes ransacked and possessions taken, and those not so lucky would succumb to abuses of all kinds. And it's within this backdrop that the baby Esperanza and her family take the precious few belongings that they have left and flee home to the north in search of a new home. It was only recently that I began to appreciate the details of my grandmother's migration story. You see, I had known that she had migrated from Mexico as a child, but I never truly stopped to consider what she might have lost and gained along the way. I suppose you could say it wasn't until I too became an immigrant that I could begin to appreciate what is lost and what is gained in the journey. In a few months, I'll have lived in South Korea for a full 13 years. My wife and I are at that strange point where when people ask us, "Where is your home?" we're not quite sure how to respond. Because it's California, right? But then again, it's South Korea, right? It has to be. And we wonder to one another, can it just be both? And so it got me wondering, in this world that you and I live in, a world filled with global nomads, what is it that ties us to the culture of our lineage? Is it our complexions? Is it our style of dress? Is it our values? Is it our language? Perhaps it's all those things, but for me, nothing brings me home more than the food. Growing up in a large Hispanic family, food is one of those things that there's never a shortage of. My parents, between the two of them, have 13 siblings. Yay for biology. That means that I have 36 cousins. And when you add in the aunts and the uncles and the cousins having kids and their kids having kids, there are a total of 140 of us. I'm not sure if these are family trees or diagrams of multi-level marketing. But that's my family. And no matter the occasion, because families are so big and love each other so much, it was always the food that took center stage. Because as we all know, our grandmothers, they're a bit obsessed with ensuring that everybody is well fed. Beans and rice, menudo, flautas, sopas, enchiladas, all the good stuff, all the stuff that might have got a certain person childhood obesity. And these dishes were labors of love, often began early in the morning or even the evening before. And I could still see, as I close my eyes, the steam rising from corn husks as the tamales are being prepared and the fragrance of the masa and the chili and the meat rolling from the kitchen into the dining area, and on every occasion, on the most average of days, let's say a Wednesday, there were always homemade tortillas. Warm, thick, and fluffy, firm enough to hold whatever you put into them, and I try to put a lot, and soft enough to welcome a bite. Tortillas that were absolutely, positively, and, well, unapologetically perfect. Now, the Humble Tortilla is notable for a few reasons. First of which is you could probably find its cultural equivalent anywhere in the globe. There's chapati in Uganda, lavash in Armenia, pita in Greece, naan in India, paratha in Pakistan. Additionally, while the ingredients are incredibly basic, good tortillas are equally incredibly difficult to make for the uninitiated. And at first I thought making my own was going to be a piece of cake because I'm Mexican-ish. How hard could it really be? But I can't tell you guys how many abominations I created in my kitchen attempting to reproduce what pre-literate societies perfected thousands of years ago. My tortillas were not warm, thick, and fluffy. They were far from perfect. They were burnt, brittle, sticky, gummy, this Frankenstein, as it is, of Laffy Taffy and matzah. And in my angst on a trip home, I went to my grandmothers and I asked them, each of them, how do you make your tortillas so perfect? How do you do it? And at this point in life, they're well past tortilla making age, so the whole learning by doing was completely out of the question. And I got to tell you guys, just going to be honest with you, we could be honest, right? I was a bit underwhelmed with how my grandmothers responded. Went a bit like this. Mijo, get some flour. Get a bowl. Put the flour in the bowl. I think I know where this is going. A little salt. A scoop of lard. Bit of baking powder. Grandma, what about the water? Oh yeah, water. How much, Grandma? Enough. Scoop, bit, little, enough. Not what I was looking for to exactly make perfect tortillas. And the more I pressed her, the more I came to the painful realization that neither of my grandmothers, in fact, relied on measuring devices. See, they'd been raised doing this, as all grandmothers do. A combined 130 years of tortilla making experience, skills passed down from generation to generation, and within their very being and intuition that you can't copy in a recipe book. So I knew that for the time being, store-bought tortillas would just have to be my fate. Sorry, Grandma. And here's what I found at the local grocery store. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been lied to. These aren't tortillas. These are what we call Frisbees. Now, you might say it's a noble attempt, but I can tell you there's just a lot that's not quite right about them. And it's not just the ingredients, because those are essentially the same. And it's not the packaging, because it says in 2 languages, tortilla. But there's something in the way they feel, the way they smell and look, the way they taste, that someone like me could only describe as lifeless. I think we all know that intangible quality of homemade food, that attempts to skip description, but I'm going to give that a try. How about robust? How about honest? How about earthy? These lack all those things because, you see, the shape is just a little too perfectly round and the surface is just a little too perfectly flat. And I'd imagine being mass-produced in a factory, the ingredients are just a little too perfectly uniform. In fact, we could probably say this, that these tortillas are technically, mechanically, proportionally, and, well, lifelessly perfect. Made by machines that bear the mark of expedience, not by hands that bear the marks of experience. And those things you don't measure out in tablespoons, ounces, or grams, but in love, compassion, and care. I'm only beginning to understand the truth that's been before me since I was a child. That perfect tortillas have less to do with the shape and the texture and the uniformity of the ingredients, and more to do with the story that stands behind them. Stories that we taste in every single bite, stories that we are invited to relive, as all homemade food passed down to us is. Because our grandmothers There were once little girls raised by their parents who did the best they could to make their way through a crazy world. There were once beautiful young ladies who gave her heart to a lucky man and chose to build a family with him. And our grandmothers stand now as the matriarchs of the home who willingly embraced lack so that we could be made full. So the next time you find yourself in the kitchen with grandma or your mom and you're making a family recipe, challenge you. Take a moment and learn its story. When the time comes, pass that on to the next generation. Because no matter how far they travel from home, it'll always be a reminder to them of where they belong. Thank you.